Hi guys and welcome back to Rachel's Enchanting Cakes. Now, as you all know, the drip cakes are extremely popular at the moment, especially with sprinkles. So I wanted to come up with something slightly different. So not only do we have this gravity defying drip cake, everything you need to know step by step. This is not a ready-made support. I have made this literally myself from wood, and I will show you what you need to do. But I've also done something a little bit different with the drips. All of the drip cakes I've seen, you've just got drips coming down the side. But I thought, what if they actually came lower? So if I just spin this around and place my hand behind there for you, you'll see not only do they come down the sides, but they actually come even further down. I'm going to show you how to do that. It was just an idea that I came up with, and I wasn't sure if it would work or how to do it myself, but it did. I'm going to take you through everything step by step like I always do. There will be a new tutorial available now every Sunday at 7 p.m. So stay tuned. Happy baking, guys. Let's make a start, and please comment below with what you think to this tutorial.
In order to create your internal support, you want to get a 10-inch round cake board and cut out two 10-inch round circles from 18mm plywood. You'll notice there are holes drilled in this. For this, I've used a Frostner drill bit, gone directly in there, and it's the same size as this all thread. So that one on the base, if I just hold this up for you, I've used a slightly larger drill bit, and it's just because I want it to be flat on the table. You'll understand when I start to piece all of this together. Here I have a 6-inch round piece of plywood. Again, just using a jigsaw, you can cut that out. I do all of this myself, and you'll find the more you do it, the easier it is to achieve. And again, a 6-inch round cake board. The cake boards are there to make all of this food safe. Now, to cut your all thread down to the size that you need, you'll need a hacksaw. And on here, I've just got some nuts and some washers. I'm using a simple glue gun just to stick everything together. And to make parts of it food grade, where the cake's going to be, I'm using cling film. And where the royal icing is flowing down, I'm using florist tape, which you can get from any good cake decorating store. You want to start by taking your all thread and simply applying one of the nuts just to the base. Now, using the glue gun, we want to stick this 10-inch cake board to the plywood. Now, taking your all thread, simply place a washer directly on there, and then we're going to place this from underneath our plywood straight through the hole. In order to make sure all of that is secured in place, I first of all placed another washer directly over the top of this all thread. And now adding another nut, but this time you've literally got to screw it on until it's all the way down, touching that cake board, and make sure both ends are really, really tight. So if you need some pliers to tighten them up, do so. So that's what you're aiming to achieve. Now, when I place this on my surface, it won't be level, but that's why we have that other piece of plywood with that slightly larger hole in it. Just to show you what we're going to do, simply pick up the board that you just added the all thread to. And when you place it directly on that piece of plywood, it ends up lovely and level. I'm just going to stick this on here using my heat gun. I'm now just going to repeat that process, but this time with the 6-inch board and plywood. This is going to be the platform for the actual cake to go on. So start by sticking on the 6-inch cake board to the 6-inch piece of plywood. We are then going to add a lock nut to the all thread, so this can go down there as far as you want it to. A washer. Apply the board and the wood directly over the all thread, and then again you want to lock them in place with another washer and a nut. Do use pliers just to tighten them up, and I will speed this up so that you can see what it will look like. We're then going to make it all food safe. So where the actual cake is going, I'm just covering that with cling film. And because the rest is not going to be eaten and it's only being covered with royal icing, I'm still going to use a cake product, but I'm using the Florist Wire by PME. You'll also notice I've just added some kitchen foil to the sides of the plywood. This is to make it completely food safe because fondant will be touching it. It's now a case of adding your favourite cake on there and buttercream. So I will speed this section up just so that you can see exactly how I do it. I have left this cake in the fridge to set for about an hour, and I am now going to add my fondant. For a 6-inch round, 5-inch deep cake, I am using 700 grams of my fondant. Now you do have to work relatively fast just because gravity is against you with this one. You don't have a cake board for the fondant to lean on. Take your time but work fast because it needs to be neat as well. Use the heat from your hands to help melt that buttercream underneath, and then I will just be using the usual cake smoothers and a knife to cut off any excess fondant and also smooth out the cake before I replace it back into the fridge. So this is what you have so far. How amazing does it look? You can put your hand underneath. It's really gravity defying, but it's also easy to pick up. See? As long as that all thread is in there correctly, you won't have any problems. Now the next job is to add those beautiful gravity defying royal icing drips. Now to be able to get gravity defying drips, we need something to support the royal icing. So I'm using baking paper. I have just cut out 2 strips of baking paper, the same size. And now I'm doing what I'm calling the castle effect. I'm simply going to be cutting a small section away so it looks like the top of a castle. Everything will make sense very, very, very soon. You need these to be perfectly in line, so you'll notice that I've actually folded it so I know how far to cut down to. Simply repeat this process with both pieces of your baking parchment. Taking your baking parchment and having covered the top sections with Trex vegetable fat so that it sticks to the fondant but it can easily be removed, simply go around the base of your cake. Now where you have cut those pieces away, that is where your long drip will go because there'll be baking paper underneath there to support it, but you'll physically be able to take that baking paper off. Now where the baking paper is touching the cake, that is where your shorter drips need to go, just so that they are not touching any of the baking paper at all. Okay then, so now we get to do the fun part, the royal icing drips. This is what your cake will look like once you've added all of your baking parchment. You will find a recipe for the royal icing that I am using in the description below this video. You will need to add a little more water than the recipe states, just to get the right consistency so that you can create a lovely drip. Now, in my cake studio, I've got to do this with one hand because the top units, this cake is that tall, the top units are literally above my hand, but I want you to be able to see how this is done. So starting at the top of the cake, just apply a small amount of pressure. The royal icing does go an awful long way, trust me. So take your time with this process. And remember, where there is no baking parchment actually touching the cake, which there isn't here as the drip's going down, you want the drip to go all the way to the bottom of the cake and a little bit further. It gives it a much more gravity-defying effect. But where the baking parchment is touching the cake, you don't want it to go as far down because we need to be able to get that baking parchment off there. I'm now going to speed up this process just so that you can see the effect it achieves and how it is done before we get on to the next step. Whilst the royal icing is still soft, add sprinkles of your choice to the top section of the cake.
Okay then, so I've left this overnight and I was a tad impatient. If I just place it this way, so I've accidentally broken this one because it hadn't set correctly. I've broken this one. Basically, rule of thumb is it does work because I've managed to get this one off perfectly. However, you need to leave it for long enough. I'm still not 100% certain in regards to these two, whether or not we'll get them off. I'm going to try to on camera. So I'm just going to explain to you what I've actually done. I've got my scissors and I've cut away the baking parchment first just to make it simpler. Where the royal icing's been supported, the baking parchment is obviously still on there, and that's what I've got to physically try and take off now on camera just to show you how to do it. Then on here, I've just been able to pull it off because I've already cut it where it was. So yes, this is the nerve-wracking part because I really don't want to damage the cake. I'm on a schedule. I need to try and get this tutorial done for you guys because I've got cake orders, so I can't really afford to lose another day leaving this to set. However, from losing a couple of these, depending on the conditions where you are, I would recommend leaving this for 48 hours, not 24. Because the air is only really getting through one side of the baking parchment and not the other. Right, let's try and take it away. If it breaks, I will not cry. So it does work. Most of that had already come away naturally. It's obviously extremely sensitive. I'm tempted to leave this one on just a little bit longer. I'm hoping this paper will start to come away. See, when I bend that, how it's not doing anything at the moment. Actually, it is. Okay. I really don't want to break it. Don't want to break it. Don't break. Don't break. Come on. Oh, I bet near the bottom just wants to stay. Whew. Right, so it works. There we go. How amazing and gravity-defying does all of that look? People are not going to know how you have done this. If I just zoom out slightly, you can see. Now, the cake is far from finished. We're going to have royal icing going all the way down here and directly onto the base just here on the drum. So we're going to continue to decorate our cake, but that's the basic principle, and that is how you create your amazing gravity-defying drip cake. And it's just a shame that these couple have broken, but hey ho, it still looks good. Let's continue with the tutorial.
The first thing I want to do is cover my cake drum, or should I say my cake board, with some fondant. Now I've rolled my fondant out in between 5mm spaces, and it's the same colour that's on the cake. I've rolled out 600 gram because I've only got a 10-inch round board. And because we've got the old thread to consider, if you've noticed just there, I've just cut a little slit into the actual fondant. This is so I can gently feed it on there. Place it on your drum, use a smoother to smooth it out and cut off any excess fondant. This is by far the easiest part of the cake. Simply make up some more royal icing, the same consistency as you did for your drips, and cover the old thread completely. You want it to flood down. We're going to be adding lots of sprinkles to this. Just take your time and make it look beautiful. All I'm going to do now, whilst the royal icing is still soft, is add some sprinkles just like I did with the cake. For the perfect finishing touch, I'm using the 2D Wilton piping nozzle, and I have made up some pink buttercream. Again, the recipe for that is in the description below this video, and I've simply piped directly on top of the cake. And then again, on top of these, I've added a few of the beautiful silver pearls. And there we have it, our gravity defying drip cake. Now obviously this is top heavy, but it is possible to transport things. You just have to think out of the box. So if I was to transport this cake, some of that fondant would be removed from the base. I'd use a circle cutter. I would then drill directly through all of that plywood and into a much larger piece of wood, the size of the boot of my car. Because it would be on such a large piece of wood, it can't topple over, and you've physically drilled it in there. You get to the venue, you simply take out that drill, and because you've cut a hole in the fondant, you just add more sprinkles. Just be creative. I hope I've helped you again today, guys, and I'll be back soon with an awful lot more new free content Sundays at 7 p.m.